I want to start today with the transfer portal because it's open. And we got news last week about some players who were expressing their intention to get into the transfer portal, but no one could actually enter said portal until today. And so LSU has not seen any sort of mass exodus here today. The only name that I have seen thus far that has announced their intention that we did not already know about was Nathan Dybert, who handled kickoff duties in 2022 and 2023, but Aaron Burrell took the reins of that role this year, so Dybert will look elsewhere to finish his college career. But nobody else from LSU's roster today that I have seen has announced their intention to enter the transfer portal. You've got a couple of weeks to get that done. But what I did want to talk about today, as it refers to LSU, was what LSU needs to be looking for in the transfer portal. I've got a story up at louisianasports.net, and you can read probably in a little bit more depth than I'm going into here in a 10-minute radio segment. But I talked about what LSU needs to be shopping for in the transfer portal. Last year, we knew that LSU was very much in the market for defensive tackle, and we also know that the defensive tackle market was pretty limited, so the supply and demand dictated that the values went up for those players in terms of NIL money, and LSU did not want to play with the big boys in that way for those specific players. So you ended up with a transfer from Grand Valley State instead of one from a Power 5 school. That was the mentality that LSU had a year ago this time. This time around, I think you're going to see LSU swim in the big pool. We've seen LSU in the transfer portal over the last 3 seasons really rely on a lot of Louisiana kids who had gone elsewhere and come back. The Jarek Bernard Converses, the Logan Diggs, guys who were from the state, played a couple years elsewhere, came back to finish their time at LSU. Maybe in the case of Zy Alexander or Kyron Lacey, played at a smaller school in Louisiana and wanted to go play for the flagship and played at LSU. But a lot of LSU's portal, not all of it, certainly got your Miles Fraziers and your C.J. Daniels, and you've got some guys that don't have any ties to the state, but a lot of the guys that they've taken have just been guys who wanted to come home. That's not the case anymore. You've got to go get impact guys, not ancillary pieces like dudes. And I think LSU is positioned to do that. Now, they're going to have to prove me right on that, because to this point, they haven't necessarily shown that they're willing to swim in those waters, but they've got to try that. And I wrote a piece at LouisianaSports.net, as I said, that went through the top 5 needs that I think LSU has. There are more, but these are the ones that I ranked 1 through 5 in order of significance. And I started with the same position that I talked about last week singularly, and that's wide receiver. You look at wide receiver with this team right now. Kyron Lacey is gone. He was your number 1. C.J. Daniels is gone. He was one of your top options. Landon Ibieta and Shelton Sampson have announced that they're going to go into the transfer portal. And you've got Kyle Parker, who's hurt. He had the triceps injury that cost him the second half of the season. So the only healthy wide receiver options moving into 2025 on this team right now are Aaron Anderson, who had a really nice year, Xavier Thomas, who's really athletic and fast and a little bit undersized like Anderson, Chris Hilton, who has not shown he can stay healthy and has an opportunity to potentially test the waters in professional if he wants to. And then you've got 2 signees in Teron Francis and Phillip Wright. That's basically it. So that's not going to get it. You got to go get some dudes. And you got to go get a legit number 1 receiver. It's an easy sales pitch at wide receiver. You got, right now, a 5th-year quarterback going into his 2nd year who was top 10 in the country in passing. You've got playing time readily available and a program that produces a lot of NFL talent at wide receiver. It's a good sales pitch. Then you toss the money in. You got to go get a number 1 wide receiver. I talked about this last week, so we won't go too deep into it. But you know the guys that I'm talking about, the Jamison Williams and the Jermaine Burtons and those guys that have made that type of impact transferring to another school over the years. Now, that's number 1. Number 2 is not a position that we've talked a lot about. But as I look at the roster, it's something LSU's absolutely got to address. And it's edge rusher. Kevin Peoples did a fantastic job this year with Braden Swinson and Savion Jones. Neither one of those guys was a real impact player last season. They played behind Ovi Gofu, and they just weren't impactful players last year. Well, Swinson had a monster year. He's probably going to be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. And Savion Jones had clearly his best year of his 4 in Baton Rouge. He lost a little bit of weight. He was really good at times against the run. He showed some pass rush ability. Those two guys had good seasons. But they're moving on. And so is Deshaun Womack, who has announced his intention to get in the transfer portal. So you've got a pretty clear void on the edges right now if you're LSU. Gabriel Welliford was a big-time recruit, played a little bit this year, and he's got the talent to be an all-league type player. But he's not proven to that point. And what's opposite him? You've got Dylan Carpenter, who didn't play very much. I thought Kalaj Cobbins had a really good camp, but he's a little bit undersized to be a defensive end, more of an outside linebacker type. C.J. Jackson did not see the field on this team. So, you don't have a lot of proven depth at edge. So you bring in Damian Shanklin in this class. I don't know if he's going to be ready or not, but that's really it. And that's not good. You've got to get after the passer if you want to win at an elite level. And I don't see anybody on this roster that has proven they can do that. Everybody that's set to be on the team next year, you pull them all together, they've combined for half a sack in college. Half. So if you're LSU, you got to go find the next Princely Umanmielen, who left Florida, went to Ole Miss, and had 10.5 sacks. You got to find the next Nick Scorton, who left Purdue, where he was the Big Ten sacks leader, and played for A&M this year, and is going to be a top 15 pick. You got to find that guy. You've got to get difference makers on the edge. I'm okay with holding one spot for Gabe Relaford. I think he's a good player. But you gotta go get somebody else to get after the passer. The third spot that I've got, and I was specific about this on the website, it's a little bit more fluid than this, but just bear with me. I have left tackle. Go get a left tackle, because that's the best player on your offensive line, way more often than not. Am I going to go nuts if LSU adds an elite center instead? No. You need help on the offensive line, is basically, but if you can solidify the left tackle spot, I think you can play with some pieces elsewhere. Maybe Emory Jones comes back and handles right tackle. Maybe he bumps down to guard. Maybe DJ Chester is your second-year starting center. Maybe he moves to guard and Cohen Eccles moves in. Tyree Adams, who may be the heir apparent to left tackle, maybe can move into guard if you bring in a left tackle. I don't know what the future holds for Weston Davis either. Paul Mabenga played well in his last couple of games. You've got some options, and you're going to have to mix and match on the offensive front. But I kind of would like to start with a stud left tackle. If there's one out in the portal, boom, LSU needs to get on that in a hurry. So you got number 1, wide receiver. Number 2, edge rusher. Number 3, left tackle. Number 4, tight end. We talked about this last week. But Mason Taylor moves on. You got a couple guys in the program, Kamorian Pimpton and Trey'Dez Green. They can't block. I believe they'll be better blockers in 8-9 months than they are today. I believe they're willing. I believe they're going to put on some weight. But their skill set is going to be pass catching. That's what they're best at. You need a 265-pound tight end that can get in there and block SEC edge rushers, that can get in there and help you in the run game. You need to add that. That shouldn't be expensive, shouldn't be super hard to find. I feel like there are a lot of big physical dudes who may not be the fastest, may not be elite pass catchers, that would like to come play football at LSU and get dirty. Tight end, number 4. And number 5, I've got quarterback. Now, if Garrett Nussmeier declares for the draft, or Garrett Nussmeier enters the transfer portal, which we'll see, then that becomes number 1, obviously. Ricky Collins has moved on. You've got A.J. Swan. You saw that in the Vanderbilt game, Oklahoma game. You've got, no, was that Vanderbilt or Oklahoma when Nussmeier got hurt? They're
that was Oklahoma.
Going together. Okay, Oklahoma. So, yeah, that's right, because he came back, so we got to do it for the seniors. All that. That's right. So that goes to number 1 if Nussmeier moves, but you've got A.J. Swan, you've got Colin Hurley, and you don't have one in this class. So while some might put it towards the top right now, honestly, if you've got Garrett Nussmeier back, I'm not uber concerned with who the backup quarterback is. That may be short-sighted, but I just feel like most teams that lose their starting quarterback are going to be in some trouble. Yes, I watched the SEC championship game over the weekend. If LSU wants to bring in some talent at quarterback, I'm all for it. However, it's probably going to be difficult if Nussmeier stays, because not a lot of players are jumping in the transfer portal to go sit on the bench. So if you can find a young guy who's willing to sit a year and feel like he's the heir apparent to Nussmeier after he leaves, so that's great. It just feels a little bit difficult to find. Most guys are going to transfer where they can play. So I put quarterback down at number 5. That'll complete my list. goes wide receiver, edge rusher, left tackle, tight end, and quarterback. And we'll see how aggressive LSU is allowed to be. I'm fascinated by this because we have not seen an aggressive LSU in the portal. And we all assume that's going to happen. But let's be realistic. Like, LSU is not the only team in the country who is entering this offseason going, hey, we need to be aggressive in spending money in the transfer portal. Like, that's what almost everyone is saying. Save Clemson, everybody else is getting on the phones today and setting up visits and trying to restock the shelves. Dabo's probably at the pool or something, but everybody else is trying to get in the transfer portal and make it happen. And LSU is very much in that, and we hear they're going to be aggressive, but just how effective is that going to be? That fascinates me, just how much LSU can flex in said transfer portal. We'll know the names of the guys that they're looking at. We'll see who they're competing against, and we'll find out how deep those pockets really are. Because as constituted right now, LSU does not have enough talent at wide receiver. The offensive line is very much a question mark. You've got half a sack returning at defensive end. You don't have a tight end on the roster that can block. And your quarterback situation beyond Nussmeier is tenuous. So there are clear issues that have to be figured out. I'm curious how LSU goes about that, and we will find out over the next month how well LSU can go shopping.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.